Seeing this, tried to defend themselves against this unfortunate newcomer who had been under Fred's command for relatively little time. Satisfied with his sudden impulse to punch someone, thereby venting his anger and emotions, which had been more than enough in the last few minutes, Clint smiled victoriously. Clint was very pleased with himself, which is why he continued to smile and stare at the back of John as he walked away. John continued his vague direction down the corridor, thinking about the incident involving Clint that had happened just recently. Suddenly, John heard some sounds coming from very close to him. The main character, without thinking for a long time, sharply opened the door of the room from which mysterious sounds that interested him were coming. The protagonist's surprise knew no bounds. It was written in his gaze, which expressed nothing but surprise. There was a disgusting smell in the room, the source of which was scattered and dismembered corpses, of which there were a lot. Distracted from his not-so-boring activity, the unhealthy creature drew attention to the sudden guest who dared to interrupt them. Without thinking twice, it pounced on John, who continued to stand like a stone with an unreadable expression on his face. There was a lot of emotion on the protagonist's face, which indicated that he did not expect to see something like this. The stench that was in that little room quickly made its way into every room of this room, quickly reaching Clint and the others. The man who stood behind Clint decided, at his own risk, to joke about this not very pleasant smell, to which the boss rolled his eyes, knowing full well that he was surrounded by a bunch of idiots, nothing more. The guy with red hair, sensing danger, tensed in anticipation of the further actions of his opponents, whom he had not yet seen. Suddenly, a zombie's hand broke through the wooden door that was behind this guy and almost touched his face, passing just a few centimeters from him. With lightning speed, the zombie bit into the neck of the guy, who had no precious time to think about this situation. The relatives of the already dead man looked at this with outright horror and fear, which they had never experienced before in their lives. Following the first zombie that broke through, as according to the script, the rest of his relatives came to do what was destined for them. They frightened cowardly people who were afraid for their useless skins, instilling horror that was reflected on their faces. But out of nowhere, an iron pipe appeared in someone's hands and flew at great speed into someone's face. In front of the face of the guy who had previously managed to say goodbye to his life, splashes of blood poured out from a zombie that wanted to kill him. Clint himself came to the aid of this unfortunate boy, becoming a hero on a global scale. John was also trying to cope with a bunch of zombies that surrounded him. The protagonist's face showed great surprise at the realization of the incredible power these creatures possessed. With all his strength, John pushed away the zombie that tried to harm his life. The tired and distraught protagonist looked at his opponent with a proud and victorious gaze, realizing that his opponent was defeated. The zombie, from such a force of impact, noticeably weakened and sank to the floor, no longer able to resist the main character. But other zombies, without wasting their time, also continued to attack John, not giving him a single minute to rest. John, embittered with his opponents, tired of the recent battle, flew into a rage, deciding to deal with them once and for all. Clenching his fingers into a fist, the main character swung it with enormous force to strike. Taking out all his anger and rage, John hit several standing zombies with one blow. The main character, out of the corner of his eye, noticed the approach of his opponent, who was about to attack him. The zombie sought to kill the main character with incredible speed. But without having time to take even a couple of steps, it flies off at the same speed in the opposite direction. Clint came to John's aid, killing the crazed zombie with the same metal pipe. John was surprised and openly demonstrated it. He did not understand Clint's intentions. Clint, on one knee, continued to finish off the zombies. Rising to his starting position, Clint smiled at John, putting all his words and thoughts into this small and so necessary gesture. But these were not the last of their defeated opponents. The rest of the zombies continued to approach the main characters. Clint, posing as a great hero and at the same time a savior, prepared for a new battle, covering a rather surprised John with his back. With his back to John, Clint said something to him. John feigned resignation from Clint's position. He wanted to tell Clint something truly important, something that has been tormenting him for quite some time, which is why Clint freezes in anticipation of the question. But suddenly John and Clint hear someone screaming and screaming heading towards them. These were the surviving people of Fred and Clint, who also ran away from the maddened zombies, rushing to help the main characters. Due to the fact that John did not have time to voice what he was going to, there was irritation and rage on his face. Clint quickly took control of the situation, turning on the fool and talking complete nonsense. But the zombies do not wait and continue to approach people, showing with all their appearance their readiness for battle. Now Clint and John will fight side by side, helping each other to survive. The surviving people run to the main characters to help them cope with such a large number of zombies. Zombies surround the main characters on both sides, ready to attack. John is determined and ready for a new battle, knowing that today he will not remain a loser because he now has a small team that will help him if his life is threatened. Meanwhile, someone is trying to make a hole in the wall to get out of the chaos that surrounded the survivors. It was none other than Leo himself, frantically trying to save his worthless life. The surviving people hovered near the room, hearing very strange sounds coming from it. It seemed that there was no end to the zombies. There were too many of them. They continued to attack with the same fury and horror. But John was much stronger than a bunch of these freaks who, without realizing it, were heading to certain death. He scattered them with one powerful blow. But the zombies did not give up, continuing to fight the main character. One of the zombies managed to bite into John's neck in a jump. John, without expressing any emotions or feelings, looked at this zombie who attempted to kill him. But then his face contorted into anger and rage. John grabbed the crazed zombie by the hair and began to pull him away from his neck. With all his might, John threw it aside, amazed at the impudence of this zombie. John then jumps and kicks the zombie in the face, but it continues to scream. But before he can kick him, John stops abruptly, his face expressing complete surprise. The main character has a question. Who could stop him from such an action, which brings a lot of pleasure? Lower your head, Clint. The main character sees his palms clasped together in order to stop him. Turning his head, John notices white hair that belongs to Clint, who has a death grip on the main character. The main characters shout at each other, trying to convince each other of opposing things. Clint firmly holds John's back, wrapping his arms around him, blocking him from making even the slightest movement. The iron pipe, which was abruptly thrown by Clint from the scene he saw, lies not far from them, while the main character continues to hold John. But despite this, zombies continued to attack Fred's people. No one could stop this chaos. There were too many of them. Michael, realizing the danger of the situation, hastened to warn people that they could not cope. Because Clint was distracted for just a second, a zombie suddenly appeared behind him and was about to attack. "Damn it," Clint swore, looking at his opponent with a surprised look. But someone's hand grabbed the maddened zombie's head away from Clint in time. None other than John hurried to help Clint, looking him straight in the eyes with a look full of positive feelings. Clint was taken aback by this meaningful look opposite him. John squeezed the zombie's head with incredible strength, preventing the zombie from harming Clint, who in turn seemed to have so many emotions on his face at once. Clint's face was pressed against John's shoulder, causing his face to contort, and behind him, the crack of a zombie's skull could be heard, which had only seconds left. From John's face, one could understand the determination of his actions, which he was going to do to save Clint's life. Pressing as hard as possible on his opponent's skull, John tried to kill the zombie, whose blood was visible, which indicated his imminent defeat. Clint lay on the floor trying to rethink what had happened. Michael and the blonde boy stared in bewilderment at the people in front of them, mentally praying that Clint would be okay. Michael looked at Clint's legs visible from the cave, preparing himself for the best outcome. Clint screamed, slightly shocked by what he had just experienced a few seconds earlier. Staring at John, Clint tried to put together a puzzle in his head, not understanding the intentions and motives of the action of the man opposite him. John looked at Clint with a warm smile as he considered his actions. Out of breath, Michael and the fair-haired guy ran into the room to make sure Clint was safe and sound. Michael asked the fair guy to help him so that he would not stand like a stone. But suddenly he was grabbed by the same zombie who tried to kill Clint a few minutes earlier. John stepped on his foot with great force to prevent an attack on Michael. John looked at the zombie with sadness, realizing that quite recently this was a healthy person who, perhaps, had a family, friends, a job. Michael behind him understood the essence of his thoughts, and the fair-haired guy recognized his father in this zombie. The distraught zombie did not understand his actions, so he grunted something inarticulate and tried to get up to continue fighting. But suddenly, he was covered with a bottle of gasoline, which was shoved into his mouth, which is why he, not understanding this action, looked at everyone with emptiness in his eyes. John looked at him one last time, thinking about something of his own. Suddenly, John lit a match, which instantly flared up and illuminated the cave with a dim light. John remembered his long-ago conversation with this zombie, when he was a healthy person. Realizing that he is doing everything as needed, John slowly brings a burning match to the mouth of his old friend, who has a bottle of a highly flammable substance in his mouth. Everyone around is consumed by flames, which mercilessly take these creatures from the world of the living. Among the fire, the man's face is visible. It expresses horror, which will now remain on his face forever. John, Clint, Michael, and the blonde guy look at the fire that is consuming this room and taking these creatures with it. The fair-haired guy, realizing that he has lost the most precious and valuable thing he has, cannot restrain his emotions and begins to cry from the accumulated resentment and pain. Clint silently looks at the fire that he himself wanted to start recently, which would have killed Fred's people. John looks at what he did a few seconds earlier with regret and sorrow. The smoke from the fire continues to reach the sky, as do the souls that it took with it, leaving no chance of survival for the already dead zombies. The heroes continue to look at this. Perhaps each of them is now thinking about the same thing. After mentally saying goodbye to everyone, John turns to face Clint. Clint really wanted to help and morally support John as he passed by, who closed his eyes so as not to show even more emotion. Trying to find words of gratitude and support, Clint looked at John meaningfully. John continued to walk, listening to every word Clint said to him. Seeing no reaction from John, Clint decided to ask him about the most important thing. Clint's gaze expressed the determination of what was said. He longed to understand what exactly John wanted from him. Hearing a question that was addressed specifically to him, John stopped, not believing what he heard, and he was scrolling through possible answers in his head, so he was in no hurry to turn around and answer Clint. In a few measly seconds, Clint mentally fainted 7 times, suffered 3 strokes, cut off his tongue, and managed to say goodbye to his life, not understanding why he blurted out this right now. Without answering his interlocutor, who was eager to know the truth, John looked at him with the most charming and sincere smile that he was capable of. And John, without calculating his strength, shoves Clint in the stomach, as if turning the entire dialogue into nothing more than a joke, thereby relegating this conversation to the future. From such a force of the blow, Clint was twisted in half. A small stream of blood gushed from his mouth, and his eyes expressed a problem on a global scale, which puzzled John a little. Michael and the fair guy were surprised by this trick and were noticeably worried about Clint's condition. John grabbed the surprised Clint's hand to help him. He then slung it over his shoulder so that he could carry it on his own without causing any discomfort to Clint, whom he had nearly injured in the last few seconds. Pleased with this prank, Clint looked at John with a smile and calmness. But suddenly, for everyone, the car in which they could safely leave this territory also caught fire, depriving them of the ability to move. This undoubtedly left everyone confused and surprised, so they simply looked at the car. "We have nothing to leave with. We are doomed. No one will help us. We will die." The fair guy panicked, realizing the absurdity of what had happened. Unexpectedly for everyone, Clint, who was hanging on John's shoulder, managed to slap the little guy in the face, shouting that he had no right to throw around such phrases. Michael tried to defuse the situation, calming Clint and covering the boy with his back, who, not expecting such a turn of events, began to roar again, and John, accordingly, tried to calm the man screaming and screaming, cursing the little one. But out of nowhere, everyone heard a malicious laugh that Leo let out while smiling feignedly. Everyone sharply turned their attention to the new participant in this idyll, certainly turning their attention to Leo. He twirled the keys to the car that belonged to him on his finger, hinting that he had a way out right in his hand. Clint looked at Leo with some contempt and distrust of his person, thinking that this could be another setup. Leo hit himself on the forehead, mentally amazed at this caution, but time waits for no one. If he doesn't hurry up right now, then soon only a name may be left of him. Leo turned to everyone present asking for help, clasping his hands together, showing that he now needed them like nothing else. Having found the car that belonged to Leo, he inserted the key and turned it. Wiping beads of sweat from his face, he realized that the car was not working properly, or he would run out of gas. Looking at the other cars, Leo tried to come up with something new that would help them get out of there. Adjusting the collar of his shirt, which clearly showed his excitement, he announced to everyone that he had run out of gas. The company looked at Leo with a very unreadable look. They were mentally exhausted and very tired. Clint, with not very good intentions, approaches Leo and expresses a look full of anger and fatigue. But suddenly, Clint's eyes fall on something that will help solve his little problem with emotions. Clint hits Leo in the face with all his might, causing him in turn to fly his entire body into a small motorcycle that was standing nearby. Michael supports Clint's actions, while the fair-haired guy is noticeably worried about Leo's condition due to his young age. Clint and Leo shout at each other, thus venting all their hatred and hostility. Clint and Leo are distracted from their conflict by the sound of chains clanking not far from them. While the two were arguing and quarreling, John found a solution to their problem by driving a bus. All those gathered inspect the bus driven by John. Leo is the first to board it. Leo looks inside the bus to make sure it is completely clean and there are no signs of zombies inside. Finding nothing suspicious, Leo, Michael, and the fair guy board the bus in deathly silence. Michael and the blonde guy are trying to remain quiet so as not to continue the conflict that recently occurred with Clint. Leo is noticeably worried about the people who are in the same salon with him. John continues to stand outside and mysteriously looks at the moon, which has recently appeared due to the clouds finally clearing. John looks somewhere into the distance at the horizon and thinks about something of his own. Clint, also standing outside the bus, expresses his gratitude for the quick solution and for saving him, distracting John from his thoughts. John smiles at this and shows that he does this all with good intentions. Clint leaves John with a mysterious smile, entering the bus. Then we are shown other events, and we see that a guy named Will is running as fast as he can, trying to escape from the zombie that is catching up with him. The unconscious creature continues to chase the guy in order to commit lynching on the man. Will runs into a trap that he himself invented and built to fight such unhealthy creatures. A whole crowd of zombies is chasing behind Will, trying to catch up with him and kill him. Will falls to the ground, showing the zombie that he is defenseless and unarmed, so that the zombie woman would quickly jump after him and do what she had been chasing him for all this time. The zombie does exactly what Will originally intended. She did exactly the same as 100 others before her. Will smiles at the genius and resourcefulness of his well-thought-out plan that will help get rid of at least a handful of zombies. The zombie raises his hand to strike to kill the man who lies a few centimeters away from her. At this moment, Will jumps to the side to prevent the zombie from killing him, and meanwhile, the zombie falls to the ground. Will looks with hatred at the zombies surrounding him, not understanding how humanity could have come to this. A crowd of zombies, understanding absolutely nothing, go to their target, but are deeply mistaken, thinking that in the next moment they will kill him. With one wave of his hand, the hero strikes a match and throws it on the ground, which has been doused with gasoline in advance. All zombies in an instant find themselves in flames, which will take their souls. Will looks at the fruit of his labors, at the fire and at the once healthy people who are now being burned alive. The human settlement Will lives with thanks him for his work and his well-thought-out plan. Uncomprehending zombies continue to scream from the fire. All the zombies burned alive in the fire, leaving behind ashes and clothes. Someone's stew of soup is being cooked in the kitchen, which is about to begin to boil, captivating with its delicious aroma. The village head pours soup and pieces of meat into a bowl. Fred, with a sick smile on his face, drags the little girl by the hand who is crying and resisting him with all her might. Fred and the prefect talk to each other, mentioning something about having a nice day. In the dungeon, there are other very frightened people who do not understand the reason for being here. Fred kicks the dungeon's front door to enter. Mothers hold their babies close to them. They look tired and scared. People are very frightened and do not understand the essence of what is happening and the reason for the visit. Fred drags the little girl towards a bowl of stew, who in turn resists. A girl is forcibly stuffed with a human organ, thereby conducting an experiment on whether it is possible to eat it. The girl, overcoming her disgust, tries to chew what was forcibly shoved into her. Fred and the headman carefully monitor the girl's reaction. Continuing to cry and scream loudly, she was still able to swallow this organ. Fred and the others rejoice over the success of the experiment. This stew is poured into bowls to feed other people. All people pounced on food, which is in such short supply during these difficult times. The girl continues to cry and does not fully understand what is happening in the world now. A wonderful night, a beautiful crescent-shaped moon, its pale light and a cool breeze in the middle of the forest, which develops the crowns of the trees, scattering leaves to the ground. John drags an entire bus on his hump as easily as if a small child were playing with cars. The dead man was suddenly alarmed by something, as if his heart was beating faster. He is perplexed by certain sounds that only he can probably hear. Clint notices something strange in John's behavior and tries to ask about it, waiting for an answer from his silent friend. John sharply turned his gaze to the side with his wounded eye. Now he certainly paid attention to something more important. The sky is painted in bloody shades. The light and pleasant atmosphere instantly becomes tense, as if the sky is falling on everyone's head. It's not without reason that the atmosphere has become so tense. Crowds of hungry creatures are following the bus without reason. What a horror it is to meet these monsters in the middle of a dark forest. Their skin is already peeling off. It is gray like ashes after a fire. But one thing definitely distinguishes them from ashes. Unfortunately, they will not be scattered by the wind to the 4 cardinal directions. Clint noticed the threat. He was very scared as such a crowd was approaching them. John demands that Clint and everyone get on the bus without making unnecessary noises. Bus passengers are in a panic. Some have already lost hope for the future and can only wipe the condensation from their glasses. John went to scout the situation for zombies and how they would react to him. The dead were already on their heels, but something haunts them. Their goal. They are looking in a completely different direction. If they were hostile, they attacked our hero at that very second. The creatures passed John by as if they were their own relative. Apparently, they only hunt people, which is both bad and good, since this can be used by pretending to be someone other than a person. John was amazed. They walked around him, continuing on their way, as if he were a spirit to them, unreasonable creatures over whom some virus had taken possession. The danger passed them. It was even some kind of impudence on their part. John was already preparing for battle, and they brazenly bypassed him. Michael can't believe they just left without taking a bite out of each one. Clint calls out to John again, who finally pays attention to him. He decided to mock his dead friend and says that other dead people put themselves above him. One of the subordinates suddenly screams and points in the direction of the zombie. Everyone paid attention to their friend's announcement, and it really was something worthwhile. The dead were heading towards a village inhabited by people, which foreshadowed the worst consequences. The crowd of dead people found a more interesting target than a small bus and decided to wipe even a small village into dust. Leo hopes that they will not be able to decide to follow them, which is why he is shaking as if in the bitter cold. Clint is not happy that the dead are heading to the village, and he needs to make a decision quickly, otherwise it will be too late. John knocks on the bus window and asks them to take their seats and secure themselves well. He grabs the steel chain with his blackened hands and prepares all his strength for an instant jerk. John's last phrase makes even the most fearless tense, as he has planned something that should bring them to the village in a matter of seconds. Everyone buckled up tighter because perhaps for them this is a one-way ticket, a destination. John only forgot to hand over the fare, but did not forget to take care of their safety, that everyone was wearing their seat belts, and that no one needed to get out. Their eyes had left their sockets. No seatbelt could save them from such a trip. John runs with a bus behind his back. Such strength is very frightening, and the speed is amazing over and over again. The bus finally stopped floating in the air and descended to the ground. The hero has a serious intention and will destroy any obstacle in front of him, razing it to the ground. The dead turned out to be a bad obstacle for our hero, and each of them sets off on his last flight. A cloud of smoke rises into the sky. Now the apocalypse has begun to somehow manifest itself. The flame-like inferno flared up in the hayloft, releasing clouds of smoky smoke. The dead still reach the village earlier, which is not good. People greedily eat meat that is somewhat similar to the meat of the dead, and this is even worse than a regular zombie attack. The absorption of such food bears its harmful fruits, just as the most powerful drug turns the brain into mush and the body into a shell. The stinking meat of the dead attracts with its smell and forces its victim to enjoy food for the last time, gaining unimaginable strength, and the mind is placed in a wooden box and under the ground. One of the madmen between meals turns his attention to someone standing next to him. He smiles like crazy at his guest, whom he has not seen for a long time. A madman brings part of his dinner to a certain boss, like a servant. The boss does not refuse the local delicacy in the form of dead man's meat, which destroys the very personality in a person. After this, it is better to expect a finale in the form of a rope, soap, and a stool. The mysterious boss turned out to be John's longtime abuser, Tim, and even here he causes mischief by forcing his subordinates to eat zombie meat. The sycophant smelled thoroughly of the roasted meat of the dead, mixing this vile smell with his sweat. Something distracted our badass from his meal, and it might be worth reminding us that zombies are already on our heels. Tim notices that among the flames of the inferno, the dead are rising from the lands, eager to absorb more and more flesh. The boss immediately scolded his subordinate. A bowl of soup was smashed into pieces, and one blow knocked down an adult man. First of all, you need to escape from a crowd of zombies, but this is not about Tim, who needs to beat up his subordinate. He sends him to close the door from the dead, but realizes that this is the wrong choice and death is inevitable. The monster's fangs are sharpened like a razor, and as soon as they get close to the victim, they will not leave a living place on it. The fat man understands the danger of his actions, but does not even try to run away, and then looks at his future death. He calls Tim, hoping for help from him, but one cannot expect much from such people. Tim pointed his crossbow at his ally. He is a born leader, but also a tyrant. Even if he forces himself to be hated, he plays the role of a villain perfectly. No matter how self-confident and cool-blooded he is, anxiety is visible on his face, mostly for his life. The fat man can only agree with his master's decision, distracting the dead from the boss himself as Tim sacrifices pawns. The fat man points his hand towards the door, and because of fear, his whole body trembles, as if a current had been sent through his veins. He was captured, and he is unlikely to escape from the clutches of death, or even do anything at all. He has no choice but to scream at the top of his voice in the hope of salvation. The dead hand grabbed the fat man, and the rest of the dead will not be left without lunch, so they will probably break off a tasty morsel from the fleshy man. Screams spread throughout the entire room, but this will not help him in any way, after being bitten by a zombie, either being eaten or becoming the walking dead. The fat man no longer has a future because of his greedy, arrogant, and unscrupulous boss. His eyes are full of sadness. His face is filled with fear and pain. Now he realized that his world is plastic, a world of substitutes. His boss is a rare freak who cares only for his life. The others are just finishing their meal when his ally is devoured by vile creatures and is already heading towards them. Screams and screams filled all the empty space inside and outside the room. Tim continues to despise the fat man, although he briefly delayed the zombies at the cost of his life, and those seconds that he delayed for them could save many lives. Incredibly, John's little sister is alive, but how long will it last, since the zombie is already looking at her, and she can only tremble with fear and cry. Tim's cruelty and terrible temper are striking, which forces him to do the dirtiest things. John seems to have heard his little sister, and is rushing towards her at full speed in order to save her from the clutches of the evil dead. He throws the bus around in an attempt to stop it, but it seems like the passengers won't be happy with the ride. The roar that John creates spreads over a long distance. John finally managed to get the attention of his brothers, and maybe now they will start attacking him, and he won't have to chase them. John's shadow, which did not appear against the background of the pale moonlight, is gradually approaching his enemies. The dead also glare at him, waiting for the moment to attack and instantly kill. The silhouette has appeared, and the monsters don't even know which monster they contacted. The monsters are already on the way, and John is just beginning to prepare a deadly attack for them. They surrounded him. What would he do? What would come into the head of a reasonable zombie? He grabs the chain, probably preparing to attack the bus, no matter how harmful it would be for the passengers. John instantly spread his legs in different directions and prepared a stance for an attack. He easily swings the chain, and the bus will move any minute and destroy a couple of dead people's lives. Even the dead faces of the zombies showed fear, which appeared due to the impending danger. John is so powerful that he sent a couple of already dead creatures to the Guardian of the Scales, where they are destined to burn to the ground. He grabs the chain with both hands, which suggests that the creatures and passengers were very unlucky to be nearby. Here it is, a look that destroys all the hopes of enemies, that burns the retina to ashes. A Ferris wheel for Clint and the whole gang, as well as a wheel of fortune for the mind-dead creatures. Those who were lucky survived. John screamed loudly enough to strike fear into even the most fearless of the dead. Blood, stones, and monster carcasses soared into the sky. That's how strong John was after his transformation. A cloud of dust floats above the ground and blocks the view of the remaining enemies. He lets go of the chain, indicating that the ride is over for Clint. One warrior in the field, one for all the walking corpses, the only one who became a walking corpse and remained intelligent, having received incredible strength, vitality, and immunity to zombie bites. The bus was completely destroyed, as if it had been in the most dangerous accident. John asks the survivors not to be afraid of him, since he is the only peaceful zombie on the entire Earth. People continue to shower him with lantern light and no longer trust him, since it is unusual for a zombie to be adequate. The light blinds our hero, but thank God he is prudent and not like Tim, his complete opposite, an angel and a demon, a cat and a dog, fire and water. John asks to stop shining the flashlight at him, as it really annoyed him, and he would have continued to shine it if you hadn't told him. The flashlight fell to the ground and scattered the light around, which is good in the middle of the night. The man's eyes are full of fear, because of which he dropped the flashlight and is probably holding on with heaviness from minute to minute, screaming to run to somewhere far away from here. The dead gaze in John's once-dead body strikes terror even into the rescued people. Everyone fled in different directions, and it really hurts when people judge you with prejudice, when you are reasonable, and they call you a monster, when those whom you saved run away from you. John remained silent, but he definitely didn't like this attitude, even if they can be understood, but it's also impossible to be so biased. Clint and the whole team have endured a real nightmare, and they are not at all happy with such trips. John steps in his red sneakers towards the village. One of the previously familiar club of our hero's offenders, who bullied our hero, is now asking for help as far as the situation changes people. He tries to save himself and asks John not to attack him, so hopeless and weak. John has one goal, because he understands that if his offenders are nearby, then his only remaining relatives and friends are also nearby, and he should hurry, since his sister is already on the knife's edge. He enters a dark room in a village, shrouded in mystery and darkness. John's gigantic shadow fell on his sister, whose tears even created bruises under her eyes. What horror she experienced! It's hard to imagine what wounds on her soul were lodged deep in her heart. He calls her name, tries to approach, but what will be her reaction when she sees her brother, a massive zombie, in his place? John tries to reach out his hand to his little sweet sister. She reacts like a real person. Screams and screams are typical on her part, since she has already seen a lot, and the dead man is also reaching out to her. He was frightened by this reaction, for sure. He could not expect that the last person close to him would reject him. The hand stops abruptly. The tension has increased, and it is unlikely that anyone after this could hold back his tears, which filled his eyes with constant moisture after such an attitude, as if the sun was going out. He is in shock. His face is filled with despair. His body is constrained, even in the body of a dead man. Human emotions, feelings, and affection for his loved one do not leave him. The little sister continues to scream and ask for salvation, calling for her brother, who is standing right in front of her. John is full of uncertainty, but still tries to convince his little sister. The pupils shrank to the smallest size, his fear for losing his little sister when she is right in front of him, when he saved her and he can touch her. His legs give way. He cannot react in any other way to how his own sister and his love reject him, and his devotion is amazing, since even his health is at risk when he is so worried about his loved ones. The body aches and the heart is pierced through. This is the most terrible feeling for a person, because no matter how strong you are, it destroys you from the inside. He is already ready to fall. The strength leaves his legs, and a stone falls on his soul, which proves his humanity. John was knocked to his knees, as before execution his head was put under the blade by the most cruel executioner, a dear man, because he can heal any wound, but also deal the deepest blow, cutting his head off his shoulders. The atmosphere is overwhelming. The soul leaves even the deadest zombie. She is small, defenseless, and a real crybaby, but her willpower can be envied since she did not lose hope for her brother's life and believed to the end, although she saw his death with her own eyes. John justifies her fear by saying that he is similar to a ghost, which is why she experiences fear. He continues to make excuses for her, but all this is for her sake. The poor girl huddled in a corner so that no creature could touch him, so that her brother could save her. How much horror they experienced. John, who was eaten by his own parents, his little sister, who survived the death of her parents and the indirect death of her brother. He hates himself for his weakness and promises himself that he will never hurt his family again. Her tears stopped. She probably realized who was in front of her, and this should make her very happy. Her gaze cleared. All kinds of shock were written in her eyes. The tears froze and evaporated against the backdrop of shock, like a second wind for her. She saw in this dead man John, her brother, her dear one, her only joy, like a sip of water in the desert. Pale, overgrown, but still reasonable. A brother who will stand up as a wall for his little sister. She finally decides to take the first steps towards her brother, who has been missing for such a long time. The dew on the cheeks begins to evaporate. The atmosphere is painted with new, brightest colors. The little sister touched her brother as if he were a strange animal, as if he had appeared at the most unexpected moment. And John's face changed. His gray world became colored, and his loved one colored it, like that same old song that gives the most vivid old memories that I would like to return to for a few minutes or think about it. Truly childlike joy on her part, the most sincere joy a person can experience. Her shock cannot be measured, since she is already talking about herself in the third person. He, too, tries to hug his dear one with his rotten arms. He hugs her with all his might and promises to never leave her again. Clint puts his hand on John's shoulder and interrupts the long-awaited reunion of brother and sister that might not have happened. He is not trying to distract them from the reunion, but wants to warn them about something very important that should interrupt the celebration of John and his sister. Those who ate the flesh of the dead began their transformation, as evidenced by itching, pain, and a strange cough. One of the allies notices all the most important things over and over again, the most far-sighted in the whole team. He pointed to the man who was crushed by a stone, and his leg was definitely not feeling well. He was trembling all over and holding himself up with heaviness. John entrusts custody of his sister to his friend Clint and asks him to look after her so that he can look after that guy. The girl continues to worry about her brother and does not glance in the other direction, so as not to lose sight of him, so that he does not get lost over the horizon. John approaches the man with every step in order to examine him and identify what is happening to him. The man's face has already fallen. He is clearly not feeling well, but John still naively questions him in the hope that he is in good condition. His teeth are sharpening, but the man can only talk about meat. His transformation into a dead man continues, and the danger is the same. Copious discharge emanates from the mouth, as if the reaction of a bear to honey and a dead man to living meat. The most animal instincts awaken in him. John was shocked. A zombie, a creature from his worst nightmares, awakened before his eyes. Such a transformation is very frightening. The virus alone changes everything in a person, from appearance to personality, which disappears under the pressure of the parasitic virus. Clint pointed out that the man was mutated and shouted after John to be careful. John's reaction was lightning fast. He instantly reacted to the dead man's attack and slammed his face into the ground. Such a blow should leave a seal on the ground, and the stone should split. John looked at the dead man with some anger and was ready to grind him into powder. He orders to take cover in front and move further to reconnoiter the situation further down the road. They agree with his order, and they should hurry up, since he is the boss of the entire gang of dead meat-eaters. Clint calls everyone together to find shelter from the zombies as quickly as possible. Walking corpses are already gathering behind the destroyed wall, and the rest need to hurry. Otherwise, John alone will not be able to save everyone, no matter how strong he is. The dead can still speak, but their words seem to be programmed, and they can only endlessly beg for food, as if their stomach is a pit of burning waste. All food burns within a second. John still holds the head of his enemy, but even after such a blow he shows signs of life. Even such a strong blow could not extinguish the torch in his life. John noticed his vitality, which makes each dead person much more dangerous and makes him the highest stage of evolution. The face of a dead man is immersed in the ground, where he should have been waiting for a long time, but the evil virus makes a doll out of him for its reproduction, to obtain energy and protection. As soon as you relax, a mouthful of sharp teeth flies at you, biting through metal and crushing stone into dust. John is not so weak and easily stops his own kind, grabbing his head to carry out the execution. He is terribly annoyed by the behavior of the dead, how they attack without even figuring out who their enemy is and how strong he is, so to speak. They get into trouble. With one movement of his hands, John sends the zombies to the next world, quite ironically, to die twice in their lives, where one of the lives is simply a mindless consumption of meat. John is truly special. He is not a human, but he is not a zombie either. But on the contrary, many factors make him different from everyone else and set him apart in the same way. There are really a lot of dead people already, and they were all once people, but their heads were enslaved by a virus, and it is unclear whether they are in pain. John notices that the situation is heating up and he needs to hurry to everyone. One of all the madmen has not yet turned, but if he ate meat, then he did not have long to live. There are already many rotting spots on his body, and enslaving his mind to the virus is not long and not difficult. He asks our John for help, but where is his boss, whom he trusted so much? Yet the man will lie under everyone in order to survive. John has one goal and he needs to move towards his team. No little thing will stop him. Tim is so terrible that he experimented on his subordinates, forcing them to eat the meat of the dead, which leads to even greater devastation and allows the virus to spread more. It's already hard for a man to ask for help. His mind becomes cloudy, as if from the largest dose of a drug. A parasitic virus enslaves the mind to the end, leaving only a shell. His face depicts fear, pain, and despair. His half-rotten face personifies all his emotions. Before and after, a second decided the future life of a once man, now a walking corpse. Now he is like a mad dog who just wants to bite off a fresh piece of meat. John is greatly annoyed by such a terrible virus that plunges this world into the abyss of despair, a virus that separates a person from his loved ones, and so suddenly, he turned to his enemies, showing them at least some respect. The situation is so hopeless for every eater of the dead meat they enjoyed until the end of their deaths. The dead man rushes at John, but only seconds ago he asked for help, and it was him who John should have helped. He, as the arbiter of justice, wonders whether he deserves it or to die without suffering, which is already mercy. A terrifying grimace of a dead man, as it is rare to see one who can open his mouth so wide for his victims. The dead man's face instantly turned to mush, just from one blow from John. John dealt one strong blow to the dead man, and with such impudence, looking at him and finishing him off with each new blow. A strike with the elbow on the arm with such aggression that he would not be able to attack or eat anyone else. John's terrifying scream, which instills horror even in the insane dead, who absolutely do not care about any fear. The terrifying hands of the zombie are already reaching for profit, in anticipation of feeding on human meat. Everyone closes the door from the monsters at once, and hardly anyone will help them from the outside. They can only hide in a shelter and wait for John to arrive. Michael is already losing hope of survival due to the number of monsters. He asks Clint what to do next. Even if there is no hope for the future, only fate decides their future. They can only wait and hope for a prudent decision of fate, hope for fate, although this is the same thing. Someone unknown instantly rushed past Leo and touched him, whether he was striving for someone and striving so hard, not seeing anyone in front of him. Someone grabbed our Clint, and this someone apparently came with bad intentions as he called him a freak. Clint knows this man and their past makes itself felt, since he had to have the hefty courage to come back here and get hit in the head by this man. Clint and the girl were thrown towards the door. The team was shocked by such events. Everyone was trying to help them. It turns out that this man is the father of our Clint, and the woman who is holding him is his mother, and the family is pronounced, since the father is quite angry with his son. The scientist and the whole team are shocked by the sight they saw and stand with their mouths wide open. Clint's mouth began to bleed from such a blow, and everyone else would have wanted to help him. The father points to Clint and orders the mother not to protect her son, since he allegedly wants to exterminate his entire family. Clint cheekily mocks his father, since he rarely thinks about the fact that they are a family, and perhaps the father himself is the root of the problems in the family. The cheeky smile does not leave Clint's face, and he continues to mock his father, since he probably hates him, and the feeling is mutual. He likes the fact that he can mock his own father, who apparently has done a lot of things to achieve such an attitude. Someone from the highest building is looking at everyone, shining something. He looks at John's battle with the dead and perhaps is preparing something for John himself. The surprise was a familiar arrow from a crossbow from a familiar freak. John skillfully sends every dead man flying, as if he had devoted his entire life to exterminating walking corpses. The guesses turned out to be correct, and the previously familiar crossbow belonged to our boss Tim, who could not aim at John because he was too fast. A certain beauty is trying to be insolent to Tima and claims that today is clearly not a good day. Tim immediately sensed the impudence in her words and asked what she said. The beauty turned out to be John's girlfriend, whom he lost and whom he loved so much, but sacrificed himself to protect his cute little sister and beautiful friend. She points out that everything bad came back to Tim like a boomerang since he taught people to eat zombies, but now they will eat him. He was greatly hurt by this caustic phrase, and she might not feel well after such words, knowing his character and bad temper. No one knows what she expects from her words, but her face full of misunderstanding suggests that she does not know what can await her. Tim, like the most evil villain, mocks the girl's words, not realizing that he is in a really dangerous situation, but his self-confidence overshadows his prudence. He began to laugh even louder, which confirmed his incredible confidence. Tim let go of his crossbow and was apparently preparing to strike the beauty or simply hurt her. He grabs the poor girl by the neck and begins to strangle her, like the most arrogant freak, such cold-bloodedness towards the one he loves. Without even a second's hesitation, he will throw the love of his life into the crowd of zombies in order to survive. She's in pain, but he doesn't stop holding her by the throat, saying that she has no right to contradict him, but she just can't stop, and obviously, she's already received punishment from him more than once. He brazenly grabbed her most tender and inviolable parts of her body, like a real freak who only needs to burn in the flames of inferno, a terrible rapist who ideally plays the role of a villain. The beauty obediently obeyed him and even shed tears, which was painful even to watch, the worst feeling. Tim is so terrible that he took away one of this beauty's legs. This freak cut off her leg so that she would be submissive to him and only him. His insolent gaze pierces and frightens our heroine with his hot breath. Everyone would like to grind him into powder, make a sieve out of him. She finally understands the horror she faces and the danger that awaits her. Grabbing his neck in a death grip, he holds it in the air with one hand, which is amazing, since you need to have a lot of strength to do this. Still, something stopped him, but it is unclear what exactly. Maybe his conscience woke up, which is not there. She begged for death, but he didn't like that, and he threw her on the bed so that she would never talk like that again. She started coughing because of this, and clearly, she didn't deserve such an attitude. No matter how insolent she was, he himself deserved it, since you can't be nice by force. He looks down on the beauty, who is out of breath from each of his blows. Tim breathed a sigh of relief, probably to calm down and calm his anger. He tries to apologize. What a two-faced freak who needs to wear a straitjacket to treat his narcissism and anger. The girl clutches her chest to catch her breath, since every breath of air is important to her, especially with such a tyrant who will sacrifice the most important things in order to survive. He promises that this will never happen again if she is obedient and never insolent to him again, but at the same time he demands good treatment. How quickly his character changed in a matter of seconds so that she would not be angry with him, since he loves her with all his heart. But if she were an ordinary person, she would be food for monsters. Tim brings his hand to the girl's face, explaining that she should not think about a man who died more than 6 months ago, and she is only his. Clever girl instantly bites Tim and bites his finger until it bleeds. Perhaps she was greatly offended by those words on his part. Scarlet blood gushes out of Tim's finger in a stream, and he didn't like such impudence from her. Tim turns his evil gaze on the beauty, whom he will definitely kill after this. She slipped past him and quickly tries to grab the crossbow, probably to protect herself from the tyrant. He understood her intentions and quickly decided to stop the beauty so that nothing would happen to her. Her fingers are already on the trigger, but for some reason they are facing the opposite way, and she doesn't look like a stupid girl to grab the gun the wrong way. She pointed the crossbow at herself because she completely doesn't want to be with him and would rather die